We can go to Buenos Aires and say hello to Marcela, Mora y Araujo. Marcela, you've had most of the day to take that in. How do you feel?
Obviously, it's incredibly disappointing. I mean, you can't come crashing down from a high as absurdly hyped as this lot were when they reached the shores of the Persian Gulf. But, all is not lost. I mean, a lot of people are reminiscing about the Cameroon clash in 1990 when Argentina were completely surprised by an underdog and went on to reach the final. A lot of people are mentioning Spain winning the World Cup in 2010, having lost their opening game. I think it puts a lot of pressure on the team now, obviously, to kind of, I think it was Lautaro Martinez who said pitch side. We are now facing two finals. So there's no room for relaxing. But at the same time, it was like a bucket of cold water, really. I think there was a combination, perhaps a little bit of overconfidence, perhaps a little bit of underestimating the opposition, which is quite an Argentinian trait, if one can say such things. And, for me, the most worrying remarks came from Messi and Scaloni when they eventually emerged. We had a very long time with the state TV waiting for them to come by, nobody emerging to the mix, so nobody kind of popping their heads. I thought, oh my God, this is one of those Messi goes into a dark room alone for many days and nobody knows what he's thinking. But he was very composed. And when both him and Scaloni eventually spoke, Scaloni said he hadn't spoken to the players yet, but they both mentioned that they knew Saudi Arabia would play like this. They knew the risks of the offside, the kind of approach that they were going to take. And that, to me, suggests if they did know that that's what they were going to face, a little complacency, perhaps. But clearly what happened, I mean, there's so much to discuss, really, about modern football, I suppose. The VAR decisions, I think that a lot of them were offside, but there was one that's arguable. It looks like Lautaro's ear was maybe offside. And pre-VAR, it might have ended differently. And of course, famously, if most of Argentina's triumphs to date had happened with VAR, they wouldn't have happened at all. To me, this isn't a disaster. And from the reactions I've been picking up, and especially the kind of pundits on TV who essentially have been Messi bashing for many years in a way and stopped with this recent Copa America win, there isn't a disastrous feel. It's almost like a sadness and a wake-up call, I suppose, there's 2 games left. It's football.
Yeah. So 36 matches unbeaten. The last team to beat them was Brazil 3 years ago. They hadn't conceded in 7 of their 8 before this game. But, as Paul said, and as you said, Marcela, Saudi Arabia deserved it. I hate to bring this up, Philippe, but in our preview of this group, you did say it would be a huge surprise if they got more than 1 point out of this group. You were quite dismissive of Saudi Arabia. And I took Autumn Florex says, who knew Philippe could be human?
Could I adjudicate myself the laurels of having said, watch out for Saudi Arabia, do not underestimate them. It's very
done. Well done, Marcela. You can. And you get a point and Philippe gets 0 points. Nil point, Philippe.
I get negative points. I get points taken off my credit. I was totally wrong. And in fact, because I based my judgment on what they had done in recent friendly games, rather than looking what they had done in the qualifiers, where actually apparently they were quite good. But when I was looking at what happened in the friendlies, the preparation, it was pretty abysmal, really. And also, I really wasn't expecting them to play as bravely as they did. I think you must have noticed as well. Usually we're used to Saudi teams actually playing quite far back with the line very close, the defensive line very close to the keeper. Here, they were really far, far more aggressive than they've, I think, ever seen them being aggressive. They're also rather lucky if I can use that word. And by the way, Marcela, you don't have 2 games left in this competition. You might have 6 games left in this competition. Remember Spain 2010, what happened? Everybody said, oh, that was awful. And it didn't turn out too badly for them in the end. And I think as well was it in 1990, where also it didn't start too well for Argentina. And in the end, they did okay. So, but yes, I have to do a mea culpa. I've got a huge portion of humble pie in front of me, and I will let you know how it tastes a bit later. Probably bitter.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth saying, both the goals, Nicky, were great, but Aldasari's strike is so good, and like that just kind of that whirlwind after half time was just sort of incredible, really.
Yeah, I mean, from a footballing standpoint, it definitely felt like this game in general was a bit the moment when the tournament woke up. Of course, England were brilliant against Iran, but that was just a shellacking. That was just a team taking another team to pieces. This was a game that had been completely one thing in the first half, and then was transformed by these 2 brilliant goals. And look, I think you have to sort of own your areas of knowledge and not knowledge as a journalist. And I'm not watching Al Hilal every week, but I know from reporting by, for instance, John Durden, that Aldasari is someone who's been really, really dominant for a while over there, who gets, even this last summer, there was a lot of talk about him at 30, I think he's 31 now, coming to Europe and finally getting that chance. But of course, do you want to go and take that chance on the eve of a World Cup? And clearly it's been a decision not to. But I think he's generally sort of considered to be, broadly by just about everyone, the best Asian player playing in Asia, or at least has been for the last couple of years, and scores goals by the bucketful for his club side. Did it in the Club World Cup as well as doing it, through qualifying for this World Cup. And I think he earns about $3.5 million $3.5 million a year, which is comparable to lots of top players in Europe as well. So he is someone who, in another footballing ecosystem, has been doing this. It hasn't just sort of come out of nowhere. Is it the tail end of his career, I suppose, at 31? Tail end's probably overstating it, but is in the latter part of his career, and hasn't come out of nowhere. But you certainly still can't hit a ball more sweetly than he does for that second goal. And I think, it's such a moment. It's absolutely reasonable to say that high line and the braveness of it could have backfired, because in the first half, if Lautaro Martinez times his runs, Argentina score a couple of goals and it's game over at half time. Like, that's just true. At the same time, I think it's fair to say, well, if you don't have that bravery in the way you set up, if you don't have that courage, you don't get this result either. So both of those things can be true at the same time. They were a bit lucky. They could have been out of sight in the first half, but they played to their chances. In the second half, I thought particularly they took it on a step and pressed higher up, and it worked for them.